Welcome to this EMCC Global GPS Dialogue. So thrilled to have Michelle with us. Michelle is a veteran of the dialogue series now, having come last year as well, and she's so super, and thank you so much. Leadership team coach, really excited to hear about what you've got to say about hybrid working. I know that it's an issue and a subject which is touching pretty much every team at the moment, so we're really, really excited to have you here. Michelle, I'm going to hand straight over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you for such a warm welcome, Nicola. I really appreciate it. So pleased to be here with you and so looking forward to hearing the collection of ideas and the wisdom coming from this room as well. I've supported hybrid teams, particularly up to 20 years ago when I was working for a large telco in Canada. I know Canada seems like such a small country when you look at all the countries in Europe, but it's a big country, and I did work with people globally. And there's challenges, but now with the pandemic, hybrid means totally different things. And I don't know about you, but I'm actually excited for organizations because I think this is an opportunity to recreate, redesign what's really going to work for both employees and the employers. Back when I was doing it, we had limitations still in technology and just cultural practices. So I'm really looking forward to starting the session with you. So let's take a look, first of all, at what some of our goals are going to be. And I'm just going to switch this over to a large screen so that everyone can see this here. Fantastic. Thank you. So let's take a look. Through this session today, we want to make sure that we give you the opportunity to dialogue with one another and identify challenges facing leaders and hybrid teams. And all over the world, everyone's going through this. Everyone's at different stages, and we're encountering different types of challenges. We also want to make sure that you're walking away with some solid tips and strategies to address psychological safety, inclusivity, and belonging, and making sure that we share some best practices too as to how to effectively hold meetings in hybrid environments. And if you're able to stay into the networking, I have a couple of other things, some great organizational polarities facing teams. And so we can either network or we can also have some conversation around that. I will, and in fact, I'm going to drop it into the chat room now. I am so happy to be able to share the content with you, and I encourage you to take this information, go out, share it with your team. So I'm actually putting my presentation in here. I just ask for, accreditation if you decide to use some of the content. But I think we're all learning right now and in a very agile place. So let's take these ideas and share them. We're going to be having some collective wisdom in the chat room too. So I encourage you to save the chat because I think there'll be some great ideas shared there as well. And if you're able to stay till the end, I will download a little bit of a hybrid team toolkit for you. So obviously hybrid teams, I think most of us know what they are, but really it's a flexible work structure where some members are working remotely and some are working in a central office location. And hence it poses all these challenges, but there's also lots of opportunities. So some of the benefits, obviously, we have already experienced this because many of us have gone from working remotely to going back into the office at times. Some people haven't been able to leave the office and then they've had to commute or they've had to connect with people working off-site. But some of the benefits, we obviously know that we can actually develop and have more inclusive practices. We can create time for opportunities for families and individuals to have more flexibility. There's definitely been an IT upskilling. Raise your hand. How many of you have had to learn new apps over the last year? Absolutely, right? I think I counted 6 for myself. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, and now I've started to narrow it down. And of course, we want to make sure too that, not just from an organizational viewpoint, but employees can be more motivated as well. And we want to increase employee well-being, and hybrid opportunities contribute to all of this. You guys know this. I'm just going to walk away from this screen share here. What I would like to find out from you, and I'm really curious, I would like to find out for you, the teams either that you're on or that you're coaching as hybrid teams, how are they doing? Are they on fire? Are they thriving, surviving, languishing? And hopefully not at rock bottom, but I have seen a few. So if Nicola, if you could just post into the chat room there, please, if you haven't already, if you could post the link, wonderful. You should just be able to click on the link into the chat room, and that should enable you to complete the poll, and we will see the results live. It is polls everywhere. Great, people are going in already. We'll give you a couple of minutes. If anyone's having any challenges, please feel free to take yourself off mute and let us know. Sometimes one of the challenges around creating hybrid workspaces is the technology challenge. And we definitely want to make sure we're inclusive of everyone. One more minute, please. I'm seeing so many familiar faces here. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Gina. Already caught Rita's. This is great. Okay, so let's take a look and see what's happening. Wow, most are saying that their teams that they're involved with are surviving. And we do have 15% that are saying that they're thriving and some are languishing. So do we want to be in surviving mode? No, we want to make sure that we're actually able to move beyond that. We want to move to where we're higher performing teams. So that's the direction we want to go. Hey, what I'd love to find out as well, if we are just surviving, particularly with the hybrid teams that we're supporting, what are some of those challenges that you are facing in terms of coaching leaders or coaching hybrid teams themselves? If you could kindly place your responses in the chat room, I'm just going to put the question in there first so that when you save the chat, you'll see what the question and the responses are. What challenges do you see with leaders and hybrid teams? Please put your responses in. Yeah, I'm seeing some definite themes pop up here for sure. In groups and out groups. So people feeling socially disconnected, or if they're not physically at the workplace, are they being left out of conversations and decisions? People being distracted. Oh, yes, balancing those old school mentalities, unfortunately, heroic style leadership where they feel that they have to be able to monitor everyone FaceTime. And does that work? No, you can have someone who's really productive and still sitting in their desk at the same amount of time. Others feeling disconnected because maybe they're not getting to see the whole team at once. Technology and equipment challenges. Oh, yeah. Communication has been becoming more challenging. Leaders maybe not even feeling connected to their employees. Thank you, Gina. And some teams have adapted to 100% remote. And now we've got this other change. How do we effectively go hybrid? And what's the worst thing? I don't know how many of you know teams where some people are going back to the workplace just to sit in their office all day and have Zoom meetings. How frustrating. And I don't know about you, but I'm here in Toronto, Canada, and it's an hour and a half commute for a lot of people into Toronto. Do I want to commute 3 hours to be on Zoom all day? Absolutely not. It's not effective. So we've got to come up with some of these solutions much better. For sure. Let's take a look at some of the other things coming across in chat here. Lots of great ideas. Yeah, even lack of communication. Oh, Nicola, you nailed it too. How do we retain this culture? So when people were all in the workplace, it was much easier to develop culture based on the behaviors and values we were seeing demonstrated. But now we've actually got lots of employees who've been onboarded virtually, and that's their only experience. So now what are we doing to embrace the culture that we want to develop as an organization moving forward? Different ways of approaching tasks and access to resources. I actually heard of one team where the people who were working on site felt that they were delegated photocopiers and distributors just because they were on site, and that wasn't part of their job description, obviously. So things happen. Needing more time to manage the team. Oh, yes, Connie. And you know what? As a leader, their roles have become more challenging since the pandemic, right? They also have to demonstrate empathy, try to ensure that they're engaging their team, asking for input on things, and at the same time, managing performance in different ways, making sure their team feels connected. Oh yeah, by the way, they still have strategic business goals in their spare time to achieve. Multitasking, not feeling safe psychologically. Oh, yes. I wish we had a full day to do this. I actually have a full day workshop on this because all of these issues are critical, but we can only address a few. So let's take a look at some of them here now. Thank you for your input. So you guys have captured many more than what I've put down here. But there's obviously, these are some of the key hybrid team challenges that leaders are facing in teams themselves. And when we actually go and talk to leaders of teams, in addition, they're giving us these challenges. How can we take advantage of the benefits of both remote and face-to-face work? And how can we create engagement and a sense of belonging? How do we set these clear expectations of when we should be working at the office and how we work together effectively as teams? And how can I make sure that when people are participating in meetings, that everyone is getting the same experience, that everyone is having equal voice? So I don't know about you guys. And on top of that, we have some myths. So I've invited the Mythbusters here to come and join us today. I thought they might be able to highlight a couple of the top myths. So this myth, we need to monitor and measure what employees are doing. How many of you are working with leaders who feel that they want their employees in the organization because they can see what they're doing? Do you know how many of those leaders are very senior, are actually developing policies for the whole organization to come back? And it's been surprising, hasn't it? And how many of those organizations are going to survive? Because employees are now saying, nope, I've gotten used to what we had during the pandemic. I like having flexibility, and I'm going to leave because other organizations are offering me flexibility. And that's more critical to a lot of people than pay and other things. And we know that employees, we've proven it with the pandemic. Was it not pretty amazing, first of all, that the internet didn't shut down at the beginning? Like I'm still amazed by that. And then wasn't it pretty amazing that every organization pretty much continued to survive even against this whole myth that we need to monitor employees? I don't think so. Most employees come to work because they want to create impact. They want to have meaning in their life, and we need to trust them. I was shocked when I heard there were some organizations in the US that were actually monitoring keystrokes of employees. Really? Does that monitor effectiveness? Absolutely not. Here's the other one, a myth. We need to have in-person contact to sustain our culture. You know what? Culture is about behaviors, not location. We just need to be more intentional as to how we define it moving forward. And we often really have not been challenged to do this in the past. And you know what? This other myth, our jobs just cannot be done remotely. The reality is that many jobs can be done remotely. However, there are some jobs due to the nature of their work that have to be done on site. And we need to communicate that to employees so that they don't feel that they're being given a differential treatment, but the decisions are made are based on the role in the organization and what that requirement is. We also have this myth that hybrid workforce models can hurt diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, it can actually enable more high degrees of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're able to tap into more global workforces, perhaps, to have better decision-making. I don't know about you guys. I'm actually borderline introvert and extrovert. I know some people don't believe it. This is really hard work for me to do these sessions. But here's the reality. If you're a process type of person or more introverted like me, we now have many more channels to be able to involve people in meetings and workshops. For example, the chat room can be a great way to get everyone to put their ideas. Using Mural and sticky notes enables people to brainstorm and give ideas before we put it out to open discussion. So there's a whole lot of things there that can be valued. And serendipity is the best driver of innovation. You know what? It is all about intentional relationship building. And I think that's some of our biggest challenges, because as leaders, do we often get measured against our performance in that way? Well, when I was with TELUS 20 years ago, we did actually give feedback to our employees around their behaviors and the values. but very few organizations do that. They focus on the end tasks and the outcomes. Hence, people get focused on that and don't make the intentional time to build relationships. Okay, let's take a look at creating psychological safety and trust, because this was one of the topics I promised we would address. So if you haven't heard the formal definition, Amy Ebbetson out of Harvard, who's an organizational psychologist, her basic definition here is it's a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So what does that look like? What do we mean by that? Well, we know that psychological safety and trust is the foundation of high-performing teams. People should feel secure and be able to generate different ideas. Conflict should be encouraged. Debate should be encouraged. And we should do it in healthy ways. In fact, here in Canada, honestly, we are some of the worst people around conflict. We are so polite. Heaven forbid we actually create some dialogue. I've got leaders that I'm coaching in Italy and Greece, and I've had friends growing up in high school. What do you mean you're talking about this? And just the tone of their voice and the way they address is so different. And then they come to Canada and they're like, no one challenges me. It's too polite here. So we want people to encourage and develop these innovative spaces. We want people to be candid. We want them to speak up. And we want people to ensure that they feel respected, because then they're bringing their best selves to work. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just so you know, Amy Edmondson had actually put together kind of like a little bit of a checklist. And these are some questions that you could perhaps ask a coach. Sorry, you as a coach could ask a team to see how strongly they agree or disagree with these statements. And I think these are important. For example, how many of you have actually worked in an organization where if you made a mistake, everybody heard about it? Anyone had a boss like that? Or worse yet, you've been yelled at or reamed at by somebody? Or people talk about it like, oh my gosh, do you remember what that person did? And now you don't want to do anything new because you don't want to be, part of the grapevine. So these are things that we want to encourage. We want to encourage safe spaces, because here's the reality, folks. We're not going back pre-pandemic. Change is just going to continually happen. Just look at technology, how quickly it's changed. We need to be agile. We need to be supportive. We need to create learning organizations where we see mistakes as opportunities for learning. If you haven't heard this acronym before, I actually encourage people to celebrate failing, because you know what FAIL stands for? First attempt in learning. So important to recognize that, oh my gosh, we're human. We're going to make mistakes. We're not perfect. And we need to create this space where people feel that they can bring them full selves. Also, 3 simple things that individuals can do to help foster team psychological safety. And then I'm actually going to put you into breakout groups to address this. Frame the work as a learning problem, not as an execution problem. Acknowledge your own fallibility. So you know what? Be vulnerable. If you are a leader of a team or you're coaching a leader, encourage team members to say, you know what? I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Here's what I'm learning from it. Because the more vulnerable we are, that also increases trust in a team. And encourage everyone on the team to model curiosity. Be genuinely curious and ask lots of questions. We tend to not ask enough questions in the work that we do. So let's get folks into a breakout here. Nicola's going to arrange that for us. And here's what I think would be helpful to address. How can team coaches support leaders and team members to cultivate psychological safety on their teams? So I'll put that question into the chat room as well, just so that everyone has that.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And team coaches.
Just doing a final little sweep to make sure that everybody is, who doesn't want to be in a breakout room, is in the break room. So that's really good. I'll put you in there as well, Eileen. Right, so I'm going to open these up. And how long are we going for, Michelle?
Let's do 12 minutes. And I'm just putting the question in there into the chat so you can reference that as well. That would be fantastic. And when you come back, rather than doing a debrief by group, I'm just going to ask everyone to put in some key learnings into the chat room. So that way we can save them and capture them. Thanks very much, Nicola. Whenever you're ready, please open them.
Super.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm curious as to what you guys talked about. So let's find out in the chat room. So rather than debrief each group, can we just find out what were some of the key learnings? How can team coaches, so the question is already in there. If each of you could kindly put in at least one response, let's see what some of the suggestions were as to how team coaches can support leaders and teams to actually help cultivate psychological safety. Lots of great ideas here. Don't forget to save the chat so you have all of these ideas to walk away with. I just want to talk to a few of them for sure. And so I'll start with Patricia's comment here around listening more intentionally. And this is so important. I think sometimes we struggle with maintaining our own presence as team coaches as well. In fact, the greatest gift that we can actually offer a team is just being fully present with them and really actively listening so that they feel they've been heard. Even if we're starting out new and we don't have all the skill sets that we envision team coaches should have, that gift alone will add value to the team. Thanks, Rita. Great idea here. Let's role model the elements of psychological safety to the teams, and let's help the teams recognize perhaps when psychological safety is not present in the team. What can they do to address it? I saw another suggestion down here. Let's create some specific norms to address that. So that can be really helpful too. Making sure too that the client and that we help support the client generate and become more aware of those behaviors. So Nadini has this great idea. Bring into clients' awareness what behaviors will be effective to create psychological safety. Yes, tolerance and patience, Nicola, for sure. It takes time to build trust and safety on teams. Jean has got a comment and a question here. Coach the leader to start the meeting with a question around what do we need to learn today to impact the issues we need to address and to make those decisions. Great. Teaching about the importance of psychological safety. Some of your teams may not even know what that is. Maybe it hasn't been a part of their culture. So really, even just starting off with a few key tips, ideas, definitions of what psychological safety is, using some of those questions that Amy Edmondson gave us, having the team talk about and assess perhaps what their current state is against those questions and where would they like to be in the future, and then address the gap. Yeah, even just Patricia's got a comment here, reaching out without pointing out the reticent or shy members. So yeah, and this will be part of the inclusiveness section too, is making sure that everyone has a voice. And so not just putting it up to the first person who speaks, maybe doing round robins or asking everyone to individually reflect and then contribute their ideas, or using mural and having everyone put their ideas into sticky notes, for example, and making sure that then we collect and we theme those ideas. Yeah, slowing down the conversation. Oh, Matthew, what a fantastic idea. Can you imagine? Let's pause with purpose. I don't know about you guys, but on some of the teams I support, and I actually have my own team as well, when I'm looking at that, it's so hard not to get caught up in trying to go and be super fast, feel I'm getting things off my to-do list. It's like a psychological adrenaline, isn't it? And yet at the same time, we want to make sure that we are pausing with intentional purpose and setting our team up for resets and doing some action learning reviews and talking about what's working, what isn't working. In fact, in that toolkit, there's a stop, start, continue checklist, which encourages teams to pause and say, what's working well? What isn't working well? What should we start doing? And we should take those lessons learned from our experiences of hybrid or remote working as well to move forward. Love this idea. See psychological safety as a spectrum, not as a binary that you either have it or you don't. Exactly. See it as a continuum, as Amy has said here. And then let's assess ourselves. How are we moving forward on that? Listening to team concerns, for sure, that will help improve it. And just, showing our humanity as team coaches too. I don't know how many people here as a coach, you've made a mistake with a client. Raise your hand. Oh, come on. I know we've all made mistakes. I'm raising 2 hands. I probably made 2 mistakes at least today already. And you know what? I think people respect that. Or when you get asked the question, like a leader gets asked, give me the answer to this, and they don't know. Just be honest, be authentic. Say, I don't know. And it's okay not to know, but let's figure it out together. In fact, leaders have to be coached around this growth mindset more than they ever have been, because they won't have all the answers because there is so much transformational change happening. Absolutely. Fantastic. Lots of great ideas coming up here. I really appreciate that. Give me just a moment here. I just want to take us back into our next topic here. Questions are really powerful in creating safety. They indicate to someone that you actually want to hear their voice. Amy Amundsen. What comes to your mind when you hear that quote? The power of questions, because that's the essence of what coaching is, right? Do you relate to that? Anyone willing to share verbally? Questions are really powerful in creating safety. They indicate to someone that you actually want to hear their voice. Raja, please, hands up there.
Okay, for me, that's mean that I don't know. I want to know. And showing my respect and curiosity for the person I'm asking. But I don't know. It's okay that I don't know everything. So this is where it's help the person to open up and to share with me the information I'm looking for.
Absolutely, Raja. And it's a great way to, demonstrate to the team that you're committed to their development as well. And that the questions are going to get them to think about and then start talking as a team, to have some generative dialogue so they can address some of those issues. Nicola, please, and then Nija, please.
I think to me, asking a question means that you're involving people in things right from the very beginning. So it turns it from something being done to something to let's do it all together. So I think it shows vulnerability, but it also shows a really, really good upstream engagement with that person, that you can do it together. And whatever that it is, it becomes a shared ownership, and therefore it's, it's your combined project, isn't it? So asking questions to me at the beginning means that you want to do it with.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nicola's doing her coach training. Listen to her. She sounds like a coach. We were talking about co-designing, working with the client. Once we get the client to start opening up, and we can actually help leaders and their teams reveal information to themselves that they may not have been aware of. And then we can actually co-design with them ways to address that. Awesome. Sorry, I know someone else had a hand up as well, and I don't want to miss you. If you did, could you please speak up?
So this is Nidhi. I had my hand up, and I think what I just wanted to share, that sometimes the leaders are so caught up in their own head and space that they, while they wish to and they want to project that they want to listen, but they just kind of continue the talk and continue their tell mode rather than ask, as Pauline has just put in there. So that's very, very prevalent. And as coaches, I think all we need to do is just kind of slow them down, hold space for them to kind of pause and reflect, and then question where they are.
Absolutely. And we can role model that as team coaches, or we can coach the leader to actually ask more questions and create that safer space for people to contribute ideas as well. Absolutely. Pauline and Rita have put into the chat room, it shows that you're valuing their thoughts, and that questions are truly a sign of empowerment, because you're now opening things up for discussion, for people to become engaged, to contribute ideas. And the more empowered that they feel, the more likely they're going to be engaged and feel like they're making significant contributions. And that is going to lead to employee retention as well. How many of you are working with teams where there's been a significant change in membership? And team members are no longer willing to stay when they don't see psychological safety there, right? And so this is really important to make sure that we have embraced this concept. Absolutely. Another way that we can help to create psychological safety is the creation of team norms. So let me just, I'm going to take this down. I'm going to talk to it a little bit more. And you've got the slides to refer to. How many of you have come in and you've worked with a team and a team's created team norms at some point, and you ask them like, oh yeah, we did that about a year ago. And you're like, could anyone tell me what those norms are? Do you use them? And they're not being actively used. That drives me insane as a team coach, because the team norms, believe it or not, number one way to create trust, because team norms or agreements are about letting the team decide on what the core behaviors are that they want to demonstrate to one another. And so the whole thing is to keep them active, to have the team actually put them into their agenda, check in and assess themselves against it, maybe have an individual person demonstrate or represent a particular norm. So let me just come back and share with everyone what that might be. So for example, let's take a look at some sample team norms. Providing positive and constructive feedback to others. Meetings will start on time, on the hour. Be fully present and actively participate. Don't you just love this one? Because how many of you, when we were back in the office, people are on their phones trying to do their email while they were talking, right? Or worse yet, you can see that, you know, people are trying to do, sometimes it's they do have a second screen, so don't assume it, but you can tell people aren't engaged in the conversation. Making sure that team members actively listen and they ask questions to gain understanding. Even something as simple as supporting team decisions. How many of you have been part of a team, or maybe you've coached a team and you've heard about someone coming out of a team decision meeting and they're like, oh, don't worry about that. Yeah, that's what the leadership team agreed to, but you know what? We're going to do this. What just happened? The whole team decision is undermined, right? And so we want to make sure that we have some of those simple rules for moving forward. And this was one of my favorites. How many of you have encouraged teams to actually have some fun? Who here would like to have more fun in their day job, right? Absolutely. Life's too short. Life's too serious. So I'll share some ways when we get to belonging, how we can also create more fun. I just worked with a global organization, a $9 billion technology, 13 global VPs of engineering. And you can imagine, they have got significant shortages in all their divisions along the supply chain because of chip shortages, et cetera. So they're recreating things. They've got high stress jobs right now. We're bringing this team of 13 together, and this need kept emerging because they never physically met one another. They started as a centralized team during COVID. Fun kind of kept emerging, but the leader of the team was kind of ignoring it. But eventually the voice came out and we encouraged the team to talk about it. And you know what? Fun could be simply checking in and getting to know people. What did you do this weekend? Or doing what they ended up doing was a virtual, what do you call it? One of those mystery things that they did virtually. And they actually had a lot of fun doing it. And they were surprised at it and just how much it changed their relationships with one another. A lot harder, for example, to be mad at a team member when you're starting to get them know them personally, right? Couple of other things here. This comes from DDI. Some great tips just to build trust in hybrid teams and to make sure that we do that. Obviously, treating everyone with respect and fairness. Encouraging the leaders that we coach to continue with one-on-one meetings, particularly as we experience significant change and people are still managing effects of COVID around them, for example. Being empathetic is absolutely critical. And we want to make sure too that we continue to establish this psychological safety because we've got to create this sense of belonging. How many of you have been a part of a high-performing team? What was one of the best things about a high-performing team? The sense that you were part of something special, right? That you're making an impact. And that doesn't happen on every team. And so we want people to feel like they're valued, that they're creating something special with this team. And of course, we want to make sure too that we create this culture where we can talk about the undiscussables. Don't be too polite like us typical Canadians. Let's encourage diversity of thought. Let's encourage people to share those things and to be candid with one another. And ideally, if you can, and obviously please go by health regulations in your area, but if you can occasionally bring all of your team members together in person, that will help build trust. And of course, encouraging, risk-taking and new ideas. Patricia, I see a hand up there.
Yes, I want to drag you back to number 4.
Okay. Creating
because I believe in that. Yeah, I believe in that very strongly. But it's really problematic. How do you do that when everyone then just shuts down? So any tips or tricks on that area? I find that's a serious issue that really we could dig a little deeper. It's on every pinboard of what one must do, but it's not easy.
It's not easy to do.
Not easy.
No.
How to do it.
It is. And I've worked with teams that, trust and psychological safety are probably their first and foremost area to improve as a team. And so there's a couple of different approaches, and then I'll invite others to add into the conversation as well. So one of the things that I do is I have them do some appreciative inquiry work. And so I start off with some questions around, tell me, so where they would interview their team members and partners, and they would say, tell me about a time when trust was evident on a team. What did that look like? What did that feel like? So at least you're getting that experience back for them. Tell me, what do we need to do to encourage trust in this team? And then you might have the whole group come back and share that. You might also do exercises where typically people get paired off and they actually spend time building relationships with other people on the team. So we have one at Team Coaching International that we use, and it's called Life's Like That, where we send people off at lunchtime and they interview one another and they share the most life-altering moment. And it can't be around being a parent, because that's typically the number one. So something other than being a parent. What's one real life-changing moment? And we have people interview one another, and when they come back to their teams, they actually then share what they've learned new about this person, and they introduce that person to their team. And you'll notice a big shift in wow, we've all been a little vulnerable. We've all learned something new about one another, and we've gone to that depth of intimacy, which really starts to create that foundation for psychological safety and trust. So I'm going to put it out to the group. Any other suggestions or tips for Patricia here? Yeah, Rita's put into the chat here, practice what you preach philosophy and model it, for sure. Share a bit of your heart. Yeah, let them know who you are as a person. Yeah, demonstrate that vulnerability first. Yeah. I think when teams are really low on trust and psychological safety, don't, when you're doing team coaching, focus on that solely. Because I think it can be a lot of overwhelm at the beginning if you jump in and say, okay, let's work on our psychological safety, work on some of the business issues, work on some of the other opportunities for development as well, because it does take time to build psychological safety. I've also done with teams too, ask them, how can we repair trust when it's broken? Because some teams are so psychologically damaged that, I think they need to heal, first of all. The other thing too is have teams continually focus on how they can move forward, as opposed to talking about the things that happened in the past. Because if they continually go back to the past, it's going to bring up all those bad feelings. Many of you, I'm sure, have done team toxins as well. So being aware of toxic behaviors such as blaming, stonewalling, defensiveness, contempt can also be taken into account, and obviously discouraging those behaviors in teams, because it will impact the work you've been doing. Lots of other ideas coming in here from John and David. Acknowledge and demonstrate it. Yeah, so when the team starts to build and you can see it moving, use something like reaction buttons to have the team and teach the team to acknowledge and demonstrate it. Say, all right, I really appreciate what someone just said. That was a really tough thing to share, with the team, and have them actually demonstrate by giving some love perhaps to their teammates. So that encourages them to repeat those behaviors more. Coming into from David, he's run a failure camp where they invite each member of the team to share a time when they failed, what they learned, And it can be anything, it doesn't have to be work related. So again, it's talking about sharing experiences and being vulnerable. Sorry. Okay, let's continue on because we've got so many great ideas. Let's take a look right now at inclusion and belonging. And this one is so important, especially right now. I mean, we don't have time, obviously, to get into a whole DEI discussion. I think everyone realizes this is more critical than ever. But let's just take a look at some of these things here, that diversity is a fact. We all need to encourage diversity, diversity culturally, diversity of thought. We are all made up by our experiences, and we need to encourage people to be open to other diverse experiences as well. Inclusion is really an act. And so when we create cultures and teams where people feel valued, respected, and supported, inclusion needs to be intentional, where we can leverage all the different voices. And when we feel that sense of belonging, it's like an emotion, isn't it? You feel like you're connected to other people. It feels good. You get energy from other people. You look forward to working with them. And where people are really committed not only to one another, but they're aligned to a common purpose, and they have this strong sense of community. And as a result of all of these things, engagement happens. That's when people feel passionate about their jobs. They're committed to delivering on performance goals, delivering their best work. And this is where we get high-performing teams. So what can we do then as team coaches to encourage inclusivity and belonging with teams? So Nicola, if I can ask you please to put us into groups again, and if we can share some of our strategies that we've used as team coaches to do that. I'm going to put the instructions into chat as well. So give me just a moment here. So what can we as coaches or team coaches do to encourage inclusivity and belonging?
I'm admiring your ability to type without making a mistake on every single word. I've got fat fingers these days.
Oh, no. I just type 80 words a minute and I make mistakes, which take it down to 70, which gives me about a minute or so to correct them. So believe me, I'm making mistakes. I have to read it twice to make sure. So while you're talking about, what can we do as team coaches or as coaches, think about if there's any other strategies or tips that you might want to offer. So we're going to put you into groups. Let's just take a look at our time here. If we can put groups, maybe let's do 10 minutes. And when you come back, be prepared to share your ideas in the chat room. So that way we can gather the collective wisdom of this group. So we'll see you back in 10 minutes, everyone. Enjoy the conversations. Okay, so let's do this. Let's have you put some of the ideas that you discussed into the chat room. And then let's pull out just a couple of them because I do want to be able to share some ideas and tips on meeting communication with you as well. So what can we as coaches or team coaches do to encourage inclusivity and belonging in teams? Lots of great ideas here, ranging from lunch together, joining around a shared project or challenge, facilitating those conversations around when people feel included and don't. Asking questions that get them to understand the value and impact of fostering an environment. Yeah. Raising awareness to help drop those unconscious biases. Absolutely. Encouraging leaders to have those informal discussions. Fantastic. I'm going to pull up a slide which also gives you some additional tips to consider as well. And I'll just share the ones that are new that haven't been shared out in the chat room. So part of this too is creating that flexibility to meet the diverse individual and personal needs. So really checking in with each team member, what works well for them in a hybrid situation, when would they like to be in the office, when would they like to work from home, and then having everyone share that with the team so that you can try to have those more personal solutions. Making sure that you continue to reach out to those people who are working remotely to make sure that you stay tuned in with their needs. Continue to explore technology that enables you to bring more inclusion. Mural or Miro is a great tool if you're not using it in your meetings already. And don't forget to make sure that you're communicating with people and connecting those actions to organizational purposes, because that when everyone has a team purpose and they're unified to that purpose, it helps to drive a sense of belonging as well. I know some of you guys probably know this, but don't forget, try icebreakers at the start of meetings. Use a variety of diverse methods like polling questions, chat function, those Mural and Miro apps. And you know what? Has anyone ever done this with their team? Created some playlists. So do we have a playlist for teams that celebrate our success? Do we have playlists that encourage us to motivate ourselves when we've overcome something? And another great way to bring up energy and encourage your team to create a Spotify list. Each person puts in their favorite song, maybe. Again, it's creating something shared together. I know we're getting a little short in time, so I want to make sure we take a look at some of these communication tips as well. So I think for teams, it's really important for them to decide, and many are overwhelmed with information. I don't know about you, but I am. Decide which communication channels you want to use as a team for which types of things. If it's urgent, maybe text people or use, the team's chat. Talk about asynchronous versus synchronous communication. When should things be going into email? When do people need to be copied? How do we know which people are on site? Are we communicating that versus which people are off site, particularly in organizations that have services and programs that are face-to-face with clients? Are we making sure that the technology is shared by everyone and then everyone knows how to use it so that communication is inclusive? We've got some generations of folks that aren't comfortable with technology, and we don't want them to feel like they're not fully included. Look at your cadence, your physical versus virtual meetings. Are we actually bringing people on site for meaningful and intentional purposes? So again, all of these types of things are really critical. I'll take questions in just a moment around these. I want to share with you that in the hybrid toolkit I'll be downloading at the end of the session, there's some great checklists here that you can use in guiding questions or helping leaders of teams in terms of how they can sort out their communication issues so that they are more effective for everyone. So I just wanted to let you know that that's there. And again, some leaders' tips to optimize communication. So there are so many things changing regularly that people want to hear from their direct manager or support person what's happening. So don't forget, you might be privy to some conversations and you've processed things, but communicate. If it's significant change, 5 times more than what you do, use a variety of media. Try to get people involved and engaged. Rita said this early. Get them involved, engaged, and then they'll be more committed to actually operationalizing things. Make sure you continue to listen actively and show your own feelings. Continue to be vulnerable so that you can absolutely create that caring culture. Here's some general tips just around meetings in whole. And I know we could do a whole day of meetings, right? How many people here are going to meetings that are really well structured? Probably not, right? We are finding with COVID, what's happened is there's more frequent meetings, they're shorter, and they're even less effective. So really be conscientious around how the time is used. So don't just shorten it, but be intentional. Meetings should only be for making decisions and dialogue. They should not be for updates. You can update people asynchronously, and people can tap into that. Evaluate if we really even need a meeting in the first place. I think we need to do more of that. We need to encourage people to be able to say no to meetings and say, why am I going? What's the value? And if people are clear around the agendas and they put in the subject line what the purpose is, then people can make better choices. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of leaders I'm coaching, they're double booked and triple booked. They're not even sure which meetings to go to. Make sure that you give participants, particularly if they're calling in remote, a voice in the room. Now, ideally, it would be best for meetings when you have hybrid teams that everyone logs into Zoom or Teams individually, just like we are today, so that everyone has equal space and equal voice. However, if that's not possible and you do have some people on site, make sure that you partner them with someone who's off site so that we don't forget about people who are off site. I remember 2 years ago, I was working with senior bank officials. I had them in London, England. I had them in Toronto, Canada, and I was sitting with a group in Toronto and I had a group in Vancouver. And I actually made a tent card for the people who were calling in the landline, because I had 3 screens, landlines, and then live people, because I didn't want to forget that there was a person there. Didn't think of this idea of partnering with someone. And just making sure too that you always favor the remote speaker first, because it's tough to break into a room that already exists and take lots of frequent breaks. Some organizations now have actually programmed their meetings to be like 25 or 50 minutes. I don't know, but we're running up to more and more meetings, and I'm probably going to be one of those people today. I'm so sorry that we're going to run right into, the end of the meeting time. So again, just things to think about, even just tips for addressing. So making sure you use those breakout rooms and polls and chats to get people involved. Acknowledge when there's silence, and silence can be a good thing. But if you're not hearing people speak up, check in. And if someone's dominating a conversation, put it around to other people. What do others think? Great coaching question to ask. And make sure you use those reaction buttons to confirm agreement. Just want to share here, again, this is just kind of a checklist you can take back and offer to leaders or use yourself as a team coach. These are key questions that you can use to help promote conversation around hybrid team discussion. What would hybrid working mean for our team? How do we ensure that we balance all of the needs of our stakeholders? How often does our team need to be in the office, and how do we work remotely? There is no benchmark for this. Every team and every organization will have different policies and different ways of doing this. If you can, in your teams, really focus on customizing what works for your team. And that will have the most effective solutions. And again, just some tips here for coaching leaders. I'm creating new words. I just combined leaders and tips all in one. Again, help the leader step back and realize that they too need to be agile, that they need to be able to pivot and approach their role, that they need to be inclusive, and that they want to, and that they should encourage everyone to be involved in decision making and deciding how things are going to be done moving forward. And encourage that leader to still maintain that enterprise-wide or big systems perspective. How do they meet those individual and team needs while keeping the goals of the organization? And you know what? Leaders need coaching too on developing growth mindset. How do we help them when they're managing all this change and they're dealing with it as well and all of their emotions around the change? And encourage them to say what worked in the past may not work in the future. In fact, maybe we have to unlearn to learn moving forward. I'm going to download into the chat room now. Here's some really great hybrid team tools that you can use. So give me just a moment to download this. There's some exercises such as appreciation circles. You can do virtually or face-to-face. And a lot of times we're not showing enough appreciation right now. And, we need to recognize people for their accomplishments so they know that they're creating impact. There's also some tools here around team norms, how to create those and keep them alive. There's also some tips on practices for leaders to create positive cultures. There's a hybrid team communication checklist. And I'm sure many of you are coaching leaders who are struggling with how to manage performance virtually. So I've put some of these ideas together in a toolkit for you.
That's incredibly generous. Thank you so much for that, Michelle.
Oh, my pleasure. You know what? Here's my philosophy. There are no patterns per se, no real proven success factors in hybrid work environments in a pandemic and going through what we've done. So we all need to learn and share together so that we can help leaders and their teams figure this out. And so please feel free to share all your stuff with me too, right? You can connect with me on LinkedIn, send me your experiences. I'm walking away with some great ideas here from the chat room as well. So don't forget to download that. So this is what it's about. It's about creating community and making sure we can all support one another. The strength of the team is each individual member, and the strength of each member is the team. So I'm going to put it over to some questions before I know that we jump into. We've got some networking as well. And if you prefer, I actually can talk to some organizational paradoxes if you'd like to listen to that more. But let's do some questions here. So Pauline, please.
Sorry, I wasn't asking a question. I was just giving you a thumbs up.
I appreciate the feedback, role modeling it. Awesome, great demonstration. Others, comments or thoughts?
I have a question, Michelle.
Yes,
I do a lot of work in higher education, and it seems like every client across the United States they're all working hybrid, but you know, senior level leadership just keeps throwing them more and more work. And, you know, at the same time, they're having people leave, they're having to onboard new people. That middle management layer, I feel sometimes inadequate to coach them because they're not in control of anything at that, you know, provost and president level as to what's coming over the fence.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree with you, have seen that as well. And it's not just in higher education. I think it's happening in most industries. So thank you for sharing your vulnerability, because I think we're not experts as coaches, as team coaches. We're here to hold the process in the space and to help teams and leaders figure out what to do. So I've given you some tips and ideas to help incorporate, but there are going to be realistic challenges. And I've seen this happen. I think when we first were hit by the pandemic, everyone did a really good job of going remote. And that was like the major strategy priority, right? And it was really clear what everyone needed to do. Then we started to see lockdowns be released. People started going back into the office. And then all of a sudden, all their original strategies started to be put back on people. And at the same time, we had DEI strategies being added, health and safety strategies being added, working with onboarding new employees. And now we're seeing the great resignation and the great reimagination. And how do we manage all of these things as well? I honestly think most leaders are really overwhelmed, and we expect them not to be traditional heroic leaders. We want them to be collaborative leaders who are empathetic and making time. And a lot of those leaders don't even know how to do that. They haven't even necessarily been provided that support. So one of the things that I think we underestimate is the collective voice of leaders to push back and define their boundaries. Say no or ask their support person or leader. Well, if you're asking me to do this, can you tell me how we can reprioritize some of these? Because, you know, there's just no way we can do this with our existing resources. Or it means the leader needs to communicate more effectively. Okay, we just had someone, maybe we had 2 members leave from our team. Then, you know what, I'm gonna have to talk to my manager and say, look, we're gonna have to pause these 2 things because we can't continue to meet this level of service excellence, given that we now need to recruit new people, because we all know it takes at least 3 to 6 months to get people in and up to speed. So I think encouraging leaders to have their voice, to define their boundaries, and encouraging them to say no. And then lastly, really encouraging them to have conversations about reprioritizing work, not only with their manager, but with their team. And I think those are skills we underutilize.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Anyone else, some other ideas to contribute there? Because these are real challenges. Yeah. Sorry, John, please.
So thank you. That was a wonderful afternoon. I suppose just to support what Gina was talking about, I am one of those middle management public sector workers, and there is a certain lack of control that you have in it. One of the things that I have found is you acknowledge it. You acknowledge that you don't have control over everything, and you can't have control over everything, but you have control over what you have responsibility for. And when you start recognizing that much, you become a much more effective leader within your team. So it's acknowledging first, and then developing your own empathy with your team first.
Great lessons, and thank you for sharing, John, because I agree. I think we're all very critical of ourselves, so we need to give ourselves that gift of you know what, we're doing the best we can right now, given what we have too. And I love that idea of acknowledging what we have control over and what we don't. And I think that's where I was coming from too. So I know some leaders who will continually support staff members in new ideas. And then they're actually increasing the workload for everyone. Whatever you say yes to dilutes your resources. And then they complain they don't have resources. So really focus on those core priorities. Here's a clear example. I had 2 health leaders who worked in an OD department of 2 in a children's hospital. And they were overwhelmed. They had to do all the meeting facilitation. They had to do training and development, coaching, etc. And of course, the requests coming in were way more than they could handle. And they finally said, look, you need to show us how your request for support is aligned with one of our organizational priorities. Otherwise, it might be a really nice thing to do, but we just don't have the resources to do it. And so they actually started to siphon or, actually really ensure people were aligned with the work as well. Because I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice. We think, oh, that's a great idea, let's do that too. And yet we've just continued to add to those priorities. Other thoughts or comments? I mean, there's no easy solution to any of this. But if you take a look at the shift, who would have thought even 3 years ago, we would have had a collective employee voice around where we work? Because it's not a new concept. I remember working at a bank 30 years ago, joining them because they had flexi place, they had job share programs, etc. But it took a pandemic before it really became a societal norm, right? So I do think there's lots of time to you really build this collective voice and wisdom. And I think Teams is one of the venues that we can do that. I think ensuring there is more voice coming from Teams can help. For questions or comments on the session, and maybe if you want to just put in to the chat room as well, what's one key thing that you're walking away with from this session? One perhaps difference that you might use as a coach, as a manager, as a team coach. Again, just another opportunity to share with your colleagues one key thing that you're learning. Yeah, I've seen Pauline's comment here on the circle of influence, what is within our locus of control and what lies outside of our control. And I would add to that too, to John's comment as well. There's a lot of things we don't have control over, but we can control our reactions to it, how we deal with it. And that alone, for example, having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset as a manager or leader may enable us to embrace that change or find different ways of doing things. How we control our emotions may impact our team. Absolutely. Yeah. Great. So things that you're taking away. Thanks, Nicola. Psychological safety. Yeah. The failure camp idea. Agreed. Awesome. Toolkit checklist. Oh, glad you're finding that helpful. Yeah, that psychological safety and inclusion. Oh, fantastic ideas. Culture is about behavior, not location. I know. Isn't that a good way to think about it? Absolutely. Oh, you're all very welcome. I really appreciate your ideas. If you'd like to stick around for the networking, we can do that. Or the other alternative, and I'll just put it up here as an option. Let me just go back here. There's some interesting paradoxes that we see in organizations. Productivity, control versus empowerment, or career development in a hybrid, proximate versus network, or managing innovation. So I'll put it out there. We could probably even do both, right, Nicola? If people wanted to network, we could also open up some rooms and enable people to join rooms. Yeah, absolutely. We could. We've got the world as our oyster. The world's at our fingertips. And I know. I like. I often show that French cafe picture. Maybe it's me imagining myself being at an outdoor cafe in a European country. That probably is my dream right now. It's we went from 85 to 55 degree weather here near Toronto, Canada. It's rainy and miserable. But maybe we can open up some breakout rooms. Maybe people might want to go for an Irish coffee, or maybe a lovely, well, I don't know, maybe the English might prefer something different, a tea perhaps. Before we move into breakout rooms, I just want to say thank you so much, Michelle, for leading this discussion. I think the world has changed so much, hasn't it, in just a few short years. Who would have thought that just a few years ago we'd be sitting here today,
discussing the problem. It's a great problem to have, but the problem of hybrid working. And so thank you, Michelle. Your generosity of the toolkit is appreciated massively. Thank you.
Oh, no, my pleasure. And thank you to everyone for coming here today, sharing your ideas, engaging in this dialogue. It's just been fantastic, and really appreciate this opportunity we all have to redesign and create new workplaces. I mean, I know we don't have control over everything, but we certainly have a lot more influence, I think, than we did in the past. And I'm excited about the opportunities. It's going to be some tough work, and teams and employees are going to need some support. But I think there's also some great opportunities that we have to maximize, the contribution and to really ensure people feel that they're part of something special. That's why I got into this work. I remember reading a stat when I was in university. I won't say when, I'm definitely a baby boomer, but I remember someone saying, yes, like 70% of people don't like their jobs. And that was back when people worked 7-hour days. And I'm like, oh my God, why would you stay with a job you didn't like? It just didn't make sense to me. And that's kind of what got me into this whole field. And so I think we have those opportunities. Thank you so much, everyone, for the positive feedback as well. I really appreciate that. Nice to see so many familiar faces as well, and to meet some new folks. So let's put it out there. We can go into some breakout rooms. We can continue the conversation here and focus on those paradoxes, if you like, because they are ones that leaders are facing in hybrid environments. How do I have that sense of control versus empowering people when it comes to productivity? Or what can I do around supporting team members with career development? Because a lot of people are feeling, if I'm not on site, I might not be seen for the work I do or have part of conversation. So how do we create a network environment versus focusing on site, or innovation, being spontaneous and expansive?